get started. On behalf of President Madison, the administration, faculty, and staff here at Broward College South Campus, I'd like to welcome you to a great panel discussion on the topic of justice, social justice. I'm Associate Dean Henry Mack for the Humanities, Arts, and Communications Department here on South Campus. To begin things off, I just want to frame sort of what we're talking about and then have the panelists take it away. Social justice has been an animating ideal of a democracy, right? Democratic governments are built on the concept of justice, but it's sort of not clear what justice is and sort of where it originates from. Classically, justice is defined as giving to each other what we're owed, right? Right now, I think I'm owed your attention, and I owe you a captivating lecture. You've given your time here, and I'm giving my time, and in a way, in an unwritten way, we sort of owe each other something. Well, government is sort of built on that, right? A concept of justice, but it's sort of unclear what justice is or who determines it. Specifically, social justice. Social justice, that phrase, is classically defined as a virtue which guides us in creating organized human interactions, what we call political or civic institutions. However, social justice, I would argue, is commonly misunderstood, but it's the topic of this week's discussions in light of Martin Luther King, who was a great social justice activist. So today, it's going to be a bit heady and theoretical, right? We want to explore the principles of social justice, the origins of social justice, and how we've come to understand ourselves as wanting a just society. And here to discuss this concept of social justice are three amazing panelists. Our own Dr. Edward Cornejo, professor of history here at Broward College South Campus. Rabbi Gideon Goldenholz, chief rabbi at Temple Sinai in Hollywood, Florida, to my immediate right. And Judge Ginger Lerner-Wren, Broward County Judge of the 17th Judicial Circuit here. So, to help us understand anew the origins and some of the underlying philosophies behind our concepts of justice, we look to our panel, and Rabbi Goldenholz will begin the discussion. Afterwards, there is a survey as well as a sign-in sheet going around, so just be sure to make note of that. Thank you, Rabbi.
Is this okay? Can everybody hear me from this?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let me try this. This works better. So, this is such an incredible, important, and timely topic, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to share with you some thoughts. The concept of social justice is a very old concept, and it's also a renewing concept. From my vantage point, being a rabbi and a Jewish person that believes that the foundation of my faith comes from 3,300 years ago, the time when Moses gave us the law, and within what we know of as the Bible or the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses delineate to us the concept of justice or the concept of law and social order. So we have a statement, very short, 3 words. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Justice, justice shalt thou pursue. It's not 3 words in English, but it's in 3 words in Hebrew. So it's not just to pursue justice that we're commanded, but to pursue it justly. Not just to have a society that's based on law and order, and a civil society that cares about every person, without any exceptions. Every human being is to be considered precious because we're all the children of God. But we are supposed to create a just society that follows the rules of justice, but there has to be the spirit of law. There is a higher law that governs the government. That governs whoever is the lawmaker and also whoever is the enforcers of the law. So there's justice, but justice must be followed justly. The second thing that we find within the context, the early context of lawmaking, is that the father-in-law of Moses, whose name was Jethro, who was the chief of the Midianite tribe, and he was the high priest. He taught Moses, who in turn incorporated into Jewish law, the idea of higher courts and middle courts and lower courts. So the justice is not just a matter of everybody is going to be dealing with every single thing at the highest level or at the lowest level. There are certain things that are misdemeanors that have to be dealt with in a sort of way that is not exactly in the same way, that is on a greater and a higher scale. So the idea of court systems and justice system that goes from a higher level to the lowest level, to the most mundane of interactions of human beings, every part of it is part of the justice system. And that's established 3,300 years ago. Moving a little bit forward, the idea of laws must be not only in writing and to be followed, but they must be applied and interpreted by every generation to every level of human interaction. Which means that every generation and every aspect of society must interpret the laws justly and must interpret the laws for the benefit of the citizenry, all of the citizenry, in every generation, and may constantly move and change and have its own interpretation, because things change in the world. Circumstances change, people change, and so forth. However, there is a higher authority. So, on the one hand, the rabbinic dictum was the dina de malchuta dina. The law of the land is the law. Which means if a government sets up a law, that's wonderful. Nevertheless, if a government creates a law that is immoral, or not truly within the spirit of law, or even if it's a good law but it's being carried out poorly, then there is a very, very important idea that there's such a thing as civil disobedience. On the one hand, we pray for the government. We pray for the health of the leadership of the world and the leadership of even the lowest forms of justice system and government. And at the same time, we also have to be vigilant. Every single citizen must be vigilant to make sure that the law is proper, moral, and answers to a higher authority. And a higher authority is not human, it's divine. And therefore, no one is to that level of law that they can make immoral laws and be able to get away with it. Because it's our obligations as human beings, and every single citizen of a society has the obligation to make sure that it's being carried out justly. So I'm going to do one quick example of civil disobedience to show how this contract between the human participants of a society and the governing body of the society and those who enforce the law, how all that relationship works until it breaks down and it has to be modified. So there's an example that we have in the Bible. There is a lawmaker who is known as the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was not only the lawmaker, he not only was the highest authority of Egypt, he was the person that considered himself, and the people of the land also considered him to be the God, the Godhead. And whatever he said, life and death, was totally in his discretion. So he made laws. One of the laws that he made, he systematically degraded a certain aspect of the society and made a certain part of the society into not only a slave caste, but the lowest form of slave caste, and systematically tried to bring the Israelites into a state of being subhuman and even non-human. And then he gave a decree systematically lowering the value of the humans to a point where they no longer have the right to live. So he told the midwives, when you see a woman that's about to deliver a child, an Israelite woman, if it's a boy, when you're delivering that child, take that child and kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. The next step was going to be any child that's born, and the next step after that, any person that is alive should be exterminated, right? That's That's a systematic way of destroying an entire segment of society. But here's this rule that he gave to the midwives. And the rule that the Pharaoh sets down, that's the law of the land. What they did, the Bible tells us two names of two people. They defied the law. They didn't do it violently. They simply disobeyed. And when they disobeyed, they were called into the Pharaoh. How dare you disobey the law? How dare you not do what you're supposed to do? And they worked within the system of the law themselves. And they said, with all due respect, your godness, your holiness, your greatness, oh dear Pharaoh, we did exactly what you said. He said, excuse me, I told you to get rid of the baby boys when they were being born. And they said, that's true. However, and they made up a story. They said that these Israelite women are not like human beings, like what the Pharaoh told them. They're not humans. So therefore, what they do is they have so many babies, and they have them so fast. We said, we didn't even have a chance to get there to the point where, when they're delivering, that we would do the delivery. The babies pop out so fast, and do you want us to take viable human beings and kill them? So they got him in his own laws, with his own system, and they disobeyed. So here's the first civil disobedience case that the Torah presents to us. It's a terrible, inhuman, unjust kind of a law. It was immoral. They knew it was immoral. They knew it was improper. And they stood up against the highest authority, risking their own lives, risking everything that they have, and themselves included, to be able to know and deep in their hearts realize that they're doing what's right. Sometimes society comes up with rules, regulations, and laws that are not just. Sometimes society creates just laws, but they're not being carried out justly. So I'm going to sum it up. It is the obligation of every person, every citizen of a society, to stand up, to look, to see, to be the ears, the eyes, the heart, and the spirit of the law. Because we all have a stake in society. We all have to do that which God has told us, which is all of us are the children of God. Every single one of us, not only a few of us. None of us are higher or lower in terms of the rights that we have as human beings and the value that we have as human beings. And therefore, we all have to be treated in that type of a manner, which is with justice and to follow it justly.
Neglected to discuss how this morning's panel will go. Each panelist will present about 5 to 8 minutes worth of discussion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Some very provocative topics here, moral ones that we hope to sort of flush out. Our next panelist is Dr. Edward Cornejo, and I just wanted to recognize the President Madison and thank him for coming. He is in the back corner over there, and I just wanted to as well as other faculty and administrators, thank you for coming. Dr. Cornejo.
Thank you, Dean Mack. I'm a teacher by nature, so I'm going to stand and I'm going to walk around you if that's okay with you. In 1971, there was a kid named Eddie who stood in front of his class for the very first day of school. This kid, all his job was to do is give his name and where his family was from. That kid opened his mouth and urinated all over the floor. That kid is the one who's standing in front of you now. And if my mother would see me and how much I like to talk right now, she would not think that I would be that same kid. So I need to ask you, Dean Mack or Dean Macia, that give me a 2-minute warning when my time is up. Because my classes know I will continue talking. You're not going to be bored, I don't think, but I will not shut up. When Dean Mack and Dr. Nieves asked me to be a part of this panel, I kind of had to ask myself the question, how am I going to talk about social justice? That's such a heady, such an abstract concept. And even this morning, I asked my 8 o'clock class, how many of you know what I'm talking about when I mention the word social justice? And out of a class of 18 or 25 people, 2 people raised their hands, and the answers were kind of vague. But social justice is biblical, it is political, it is civil, it has a rich tradition. The options I had were numerous. I could have gone back to Hebrew scriptures for my seminary training. I could have gone back to Vatican teachings for my seminary training. I could have done, but no. I decided to go to my aha moment, something that Vida likes to use. Vida can raise her hand. She loves finding out about people's aha moments. And it is the very first chapter of a book by the name of Mere Christianity, written by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is the same man who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Screwtape Letters, a whole series of things. And if you haven't read any of his work, start. It's amazing. And in the first chapter of Mere Christianity, he basically boils down human existence to 3 instincts. And if you want, you can write this down and impress your teachers, impress me just because you're paying attention, whatever you want. And he says that those 3 instincts are the following. It's to protect myself and what is mine. Second instinct, to flee from danger. In psychology, we call that what? Fight or flight. Very good. And he says we all know these 2 instincts. But he says there's a third instinct that I've noticed in every single human being I have encountered. And that instinct is that when something wrong happens to another person, I feel guilty for not helping. Every time I see an old woman cross the street and I don't help, what is it that makes me rethink that 10 steps later? What is it that makes me regret the fact that I saw somebody drop $1 and I didn't give it back to them? What makes me regret the fact that that homeless person down the street did not have enough to eat, but I didn't have the courage to give him my burger or my leftover fry? And he says that instinct is the basis of Christianity. It is the basis of Judaism. It is the basis of all the great religions of the world. And so therefore I asked my class the other day, how do you make a difference in an unjust world? Dr. James on Tuesday mentioned, how do I value my own self, my own personality, my own humanity in an unjust world? How do I change it? What Rabbi Goldenholz has said is phenomenal from a political level, from a macro level, etc. When we're talking about the individual person, how Christian are you really? How Jewish are you really? How Buddhist are you really? If all you're really going to protect is what is yours. The other option was this. I could just talk about it from a theological perspective. The Catholic Church, for example, has a rich history of social justice teachings that goes back to 1870s and the encyclical of Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, about how we should deal with workers, how should we deal with union workers, strikes, employment, children, women, birth control, you name it, it was mentioned. Now we know that today the Catholic Church is very much criticized, but that history is still there. And the beautiful part of that church history is that it's debated constantly on the level of theologians. But I didn't want to do that either, for one simple reason. This young man is going to fall asleep if I continue talking about theology. You might not be interested in the philosophy of Vatican II in 1961 to 1963, and some of you may be totally antipathetic to religion. So I decided to make it personal. I went to a high school that was filled with 123 students. That was the entire school. 23 of us graduated in 1987. And from day 1 of 9th grade, we were taught this every single day, this motto. You have a responsibility to the world. You have a mission to complete. You have a vision to build. You are responsible to the least of your neighbors. And this is perhaps where Rabbi's talk comes into the picture, and hopefully what Judge Lerner-Wren's talk is going to do, is combine it when we talk about what the Catholic Church calls a preferential option for the poor. What is a preferential option for the poor? Always siding on the side of the person who needs it. We're not talking about civil rights. We're not talking about equal rights. We're not talking about gay marriage. We're not talking about women's rights. We're talking about all of human rights. And those human rights start with whom? With you. Not with me. Not with Rabbi. Not with Her Honor. And you know why? Because no matter how much we say and what we say, unless it grabs you by the heart, pulls you out, and makes you do something, our words are worthless. So don't come to me and tell me you know what the teachings are, or what the Hebrews say, or what the Christians say, unless you're willing to challenge yourself and make this world a better place. When was the last time you helped an elderly woman? That's social justice. When was the last time you helped somebody get out of rehab? That is social justice. When was the last time you prevented somebody from falling down the street? Or you're even your grandmother's best friend with her groceries? That is social justice. So we could talk about the philosophy, the theology, etc. But unless you're willing to do the little things that makes you the better person, and therefore makes your neighbor an even better person, I don't know if you've done anything. And that's my challenge to you. In this week of social justice, forget civil rights, but keep it in the back of your mind. Forget gay rights, but keep it in the back of your mind. Think human rights. Think human rights. Just think human. Amen.
Thank you. Judges sit. I'll sit. It's so great to be here, but just to give you just a 1-minute experience of what it's like to be in my courtroom every now and again, more so than I probably even want to care to think about, you might hear me do and say this. What does a judge have to do to deliver some social justice in this world? That is in the middle of my courtroom. And it really, I think, echoes what the rabbi was talking about when we think about social justice. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it, I think, from more of a justice, since I'm in justice, perspective. And that is that when we think about justice, you know, we think about it in the most glamorous, fantastic, mythological sense, correct? That, you know, we believe, we want idealistically justice for all, correct? After all, you know, we're Americans, correct? And somehow we think that, you know, those ideals that our democracy being what we perceive as the greatest, you know, free nation in the world, are so dear to us that we should expect them. We should expect them. Now, I've been sitting on the bench, I know, don't fall over, for like 18 years. And when Dr. Mack gave me this research assignment, and I've been doing social justice work, I started the first human rights problem-solving specialized mental health court in the entire nation. 17 are kidding. Dedicated to the decriminalization of persons with mental illness, and hold that thought to the side, you know, just for a second. But when Dr. Mack gave me this assignment, I mean, I've been studying doctor for like 5 hours last night. I mean, if you brought in 30 different experts from all different disciplines, everybody would have a different view of what is social justice, correct? What is social justice? And, you know, the idea, though, that it doesn't necessarily carry a particular label, right? Or a particular definition to me, and I think concurrently to everyone in this panel, makes social justice so incredibly vibrant, correct? You can see it, you could live it, you can breathe it, you could wear it, you could sing it, you could dance it, right? It can be a message shirt, it could be one earring, it could be the ink that you put on your shoulder, right? Or wherever. And so, in our times that we are living in now, where social media becomes the intercept of everything, right? We watched in horror just a couple of weeks ago the brutal killings in Paris, correct? Of cartoonists, of journalists. They're cartoonists or satirists. They're journalists, they're writers, they're artists. We watched and listened and, I don't know, I guess downloaded, the interview when we thought, well, okay, I did, but I'm just not a big, James Franco fan. But that's not the point. The point that I'm trying to make is that when North Korea, right, hacked into Sony, right, theaters, we all know about the story, correct? You know what I'm talking about, right? And all of a sudden, it threw one of our larger, film media, organizations globally into chaos. All of a sudden, censorship became an act of war. And the idea that somebody, I think it was $10 when you could download it off of iTunes when they first decided to go ahead and release it, through a different medium to kind of stand up, if you will, initially. Remember, they didn't want to. It was like, we weren't going to release it, then we will release it, then we'll release it, you can download it, now you can get it on Netflix. $10, you can download. The question I have, were you taking a social justice stand when you downloaded that film? Yes or no? Come on, come on.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Come on. Yes. Just that act of downloading that film. Who saw the film? I didn't. Did you like it? I mean,
No.
Not really. Okay. That's what I heard. But notwithstanding that, that was an affirmative act of social justice when you did that. Correct? Who saw Selma? Raise your hand. Selma. If you did not see Selma, run.
Amen.
Thank you. If you did not see Selma, it will change your life. Now, I don't know why it didn't get nominated, right? I don't know why it got snubbed at the Golden Globes last week. Maybe, this Sunday on the SAGs it'll get a bigger play. I don't know. But go see Selma. You go see Selma. Is that an act of social justice? Yes or no? Come on.
Yes.
Yes. The point that I am making, that the professor was making, that the rabbi is making, is that we live in a time where your passions, correct, and your life purposes and your creativity are easily translated into acts of social justice. What are we talking about? Well, all you've got to do is go, for example, to Huffington Post. I just posted my new link today, correct? And it's called, what is it called? The Growth of Mental Health Courts, that's what I innovated, a chance to humanize justice. What does it mean to humanize justice, and why, as the rabbi was talking about not just having laws, but having laws that are applied justly? What does it mean to you? Why is it important to humanize justice, do you think? Any thoughts? No thoughts are wrong. Everything's good. Everything's positive. Any thoughts? Start us out. Because justice isn't always fair. Could you believe? Could you believe? Justice isn't always fair. The United States has the largest incarcerative population in the globe, on the planet. We lock up more people in jails and prisons than China, than Russia, than Iraq. Why? Anybody? It's complicated. Well, okay, let's hear it. Come. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up.
Basically, I feel that's the reason why there's so many people in jail, because police officers do have quotas also, so they have to put away a certain amount of people in jail. And on top of that, it's private owned prisons, so they get paid for it.
Okay, so the financial incentives of the prison industrial complex and all the things that go into institutional bias, like racial profiling, correct, and all these disparities and laws and wealth and health and what? And resources, correct?
Yes.
Social justice is also about distribution of resources. Wealth, what else? Health, food, technology, right? How many people come into my courtroom and don't have smartphones? Because they can't afford it, correct? So these are just a few examples of what social justice is, and I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Mack.
Certainly, we are open for at least another 10 minutes for questions and answers and dialogue. I know officially the forum ends at 10:45 to make it to 11 o'clock classes, but feel free to stay after that. But let's open up the floor to some conversation, since this is for you, essentially. We can continue on that point or pick off where Dr. Cornejo or the rabbi left off. Yes, sir. Mr. Jackson. Nice and loud.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank all three of you for being here. And I'm really appreciative of your presence as well as everybody else in this room. But I have one question for all of you. You guys spoke before me about just social justice from an equitable standpoint for everybody. So how do you think we as people could implement it and keep it sustainable for long periods of time and another generation coming up under us?
I can try to answer that. I think for many of you, I've been teaching for 27 years. I've been alive for 49. And I think you all, and I'm saying you all, have a resistance to just following your basic instinct, like C.S. Lewis said, to do the small things that do good. I think that's the first step, is to overcome that. Oprah Winfrey has done it through random acts of kindness. How many of you have gone out and taught CCD? How many of you teach Arabic in your Muslim schools? How many of you do the very little things that will get somebody that small resource that just might make their day? And you don't have to be a professional at it. You have that instinct already. Don't fight it. And that's where C.S. Lewis comes in, I think. And it's what's led me, and this is not what I mentioned in my talk, but I was, the fourth approach I could have taken is my own life. I was impelled and propelled into social justice by the people around me, by telling me, Ed, you have a place on this planet. Do it. Do it. But I'm looking at faces, blankly looking back at me, telling me, no, I don't. And my answer to that, and I'm sure the judge and the rabbi will agree with me, yes, you do. And that is your responsibility. Follow that instinct.
The question is really at the heart of where we all come together today, but we all as human beings come together as society. If we live together on a small little planet that we have, which is getting smaller and smaller by the minute, because we have quicker ways and easier ways to communicate and to see what's going on and to talk to each other in different ways. When we see something that's wrong, there's such a thing as, you know, as the good professor talks about this, the three instincts. They're also the same, and another way of describing it is the social consciousness. And there's the individual conscience that says something is not right. When you know something's not right, then you're going to ask yourself, well, I'm just one person. What can one person do? Well, one person, his name was Dr. Martin Luther King, made a huge difference in this world because he was passionate about what he felt was wrong. And he was passionate enough to talk about it and to stand up and to risk his life, and ultimately made the supreme sacrifice, unfortunately, for all of us. But he was willing to risk his life and risk everything for what? For humanity, for justice, for what's right, for what's proper and what's moral. He knew that there's a higher law. He knew that there's a higher calling that all of us have. And one person does make a difference if you really take a step forward and say, this is not right. There was another fellow, Gandhi, who saw that there were some injustices that were happening in his society. He stood up and he sat down and he asked everybody else to sit down and have, it's not passive resistance, it's very active resistance against injustice. There were things that were going on that were wrong and they were legal. Society has an obligation to protect all of its citizens, but sometimes things go a little bit off to the right or to the left, or up or down. Things can happen that are not appropriate. Laws that are made that are not moral. And society has an obligation. That means the people, the citizens, have not only the right, but they have the obligation. All of us have the obligation. When something is not right, to do something about it. At the very least, to open our mouth. At the very least, to talk. To express ourselves, to stand up like the one that stood up and said that I have a vision of a true society where everybody is treated properly and equally. He stood up and did that. He risked everything for it. And he did change America. Not enough, unfortunately, because he was cut down way too early. But we need people like Dr. Martin Luther King to stand up and to speak their minds and to show that resistance against injustice, nonviolence is not passive. It's very powerful, it's very potent. And resistance against that which is wrong is truly right.
I would just add to ask yourselves, what kind of world do you want? What kind of world do you want for you? What kind of world do you want for your children and everybody else's children? And then pick anything. Act on what you are passionate about. And, and that's how you play a role. And I know you asked the question, and you asked it with great humility. But the fact that you're here, the fact that you all are here, leads me to believe that you are already engaged. You might not be totally aware, correct? But the judge says.
Over here to my left. Go ahead, nice and loud.
How are we supposed to do that? To live in a society where everyone cares about your benefits? Like how
Can you just stand up and speak a little louder?
I like how she said, like the brutal killing, Paris. There's 2,000 people that died in Nigeria that nobody talked about, nobody really sees. And 40 leaders went to Paris. It's because the benefits and what they want and what they need. We live in a society where just everybody cares about themselves. How are we really supposed to be changing our society to what we want if our leaders and our models are
Because you are the leader. You answered your own question. We all are leaders. We all lead in our own way. It doesn't matter. I think that if you have a view, a world view, that everything is so complicated and that it's impossible, then that will lead to paralysis. But we're saying it's everywhere. And those really complicated, highly complex problems, I might not be able to fix. I could work towards fixing them. But that's really what it's about. It's about working towards repair, restoration, and justice across whatever issues and areas you're interested in. Okay? Optimism.
One of the major factors in creating change is education, but we see people from less wealthy parts, they don't receive the same education that benefits as people that are wealthy. And so how do those people make change? Because those are the ones that are actually experience the social injustice.
It's a great topic, especially now with the president's suggestion that all community college should be free. Education is a form of empowerment, right? And it's sort of an injustice, at least, that not everybody's educated. But here you have an interesting tension. The good that's to be achieved by educating everyone, but the obvious cost that it's going to happen or incur, that obvious cost that other people are going to incur to pay for it. Do we have a moral obligation, apart from the law, to sort of empower people by way of education?
I just wanted to add, that is probably one of the top 10 big issues. Is the opportunity for education for everybody, for all, correct? Access, affordability, qualitative, etc. In this new age. But you can see also how things are changing, which creates a tension, for this institution, open source learning, that you can go to the Khan Academy anywhere in the world and get free courses online, correct?
Right.
And you can see how the world is changing to be able to reduce these disparities, and it can happen from many different levels. From legislative levels, like Dr. Mack just referenced, or from grassroots efforts in literacy, right, and mentoring. So there's all kinds of ways of bridging the inequities of education, correct?
Right. But technologically wise, technology isn't bringing the wealthy and the less wealthy closer. It's actually setting them far apart, because we don't see kids from less wealthy families have access to internet or computers.
I think it's a great issue for you. I think it's your issue.
I want to say something that is a little bit controversial, which is that I disagree with you 100% on the idea of distribution of education. Education is available to anyone in the world today that wants it. And the fact is, if you want to get the highest level of education, for example in technology, which we can call MIT as one of the highest places in the world for technological advanced studies, it's free for anybody who wants it. All you need to do is have a desire to have it for free. You don't even have to go there. You can go to a public library It's free shareware. Every single course that's being taught there is available to anyone who wants it. Every bit of the tests and the text and everything, it's free. Now, it took, somebody asked a question over there, it took somebody who said, it's unfair that certain people have the privilege to study the higher level of education and others don't. And somebody stood up and said, that's right. I have a voice, and my conscience tells me it's wrong to have exclusivity in education. So therefore, he revolutionized the concept of exclusivity, and he said, it is now available to everyone in the world.
Everyone. Through the internet. Through the power of getting in front of a computer. Now, you don't have to own a computer. There are public libraries. And there are recycled computers that all kinds of people who say, well, there are people who can't even reach the library, so let's make available things that, you know, computers every day, there's a new computer, there's a new version, so let's take the ones that are not as new and give it to people who don't have it. That's because one person stands up and speaks, they open their mouth, they use their voice, and they talk about what's right. They talk about equalization of opportunity. And if you have the passion, and it sounds like you do, look at it from that perspective and do something with it. And anyone over here that wants to do something, I believe, and I have every bit of right to believe that you can change the world. You can change things that make you really upset, that makes you inside your inner voice that tells you it's wrong. In your gut, if you know that some things are not appropriate, then you take the step, you take the action.
Point well taken, Bill. Thank you very much. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Yeah, go right ahead.
Does social justice need to be one for all, or based on individual ideas and beliefs? Like, for example, I do not support marijuana, but some states do, and they impose that on other citizens.
Seems like one person's understanding of justice may be another person's understanding of injustice, and at what point, how do we figure that out? Is what you're saying?
For me, for example, some things are immoral, but for others, it's a sense of living, and they claim they have their own right for that. So how we can deal with that?
No, I think that those, it is a great question. I think that answer is probably, better, targeting, the political nature of governance and public policy, and how public policy ultimately ends up in legislation, correct? When Colorado passed its laws to legalize or decriminalize marijuana, Florida did not. Correct? And so that gets more into the organizational and political structure in whatever country,
I think that's a great question to ask of a philosophy teacher here on South Campus. And I would encourage you all to sign up for a philosophy course to explore these questions more. No, but it's seriously, it's a really interesting question when one person's understanding of justice sort of begins to oppose another, and how do we meet that out in a civil society? We have our guests until 11 o'clock, so I would encourage you to stick around for another 15 minutes. For those that obviously want to leave, you're free to do so. Thank you very much for your attention, but we're going to be staying around for another 15 minutes. And there is a survey, if you just hand in the survey to Dr. Nieves in the back. But please stick around if you want to talk.